This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Karl Stevens. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek, and on this episode I have the pleasure of talking with Karl Stevens. His latest work, Penny, is appearing regularly in The Village Voice, and we talk about that as well as many of his other works. But before we get into that conversation, I want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some incredible, unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price. Sometimes 50% off cover, but many times you can find discounts that are more impressive than that. And for the month of February, you can count on great bundles, as you always can, with Discount Comic Book Service. In fact, right now, if you check them out, you can find both Marvel bundles, the Marvel Star Wars bundle, and the Marvel Kids bundle at 50% off. And then there's a whole slew of DC bundles. There's various DC Universe Rebirth bundles, but you can also find the Hanna-Barbera bundle, the DC Kids bundle, and my favorite, the DC Vertigo bundle at 50% off. So you gotta check out the prices at Discount Comic Book Service. Their website is dcbservice.com. Go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. The conversation you're about to hear with Karl Stevens is a long time in coming. I first got in touch with Karl back in 2015 when I learned that he and Gustavo Turner had a new book coming out from Alternative Comics, Imitating Life, Success, and Other Stories. So I got in touch with him, and we made tentative plans to have him on the Comics Alternative. However, there were some complications with the publication of Imitating Life, Success, and Other Stories, and so we put the interview on hold. And we put it on hold for a little over a year, which was unfortunate. But on the upside, we used the occasion of his new Village Voice strip, Penny, as an occasion to bring him on the Comics Alternative. So during this conversation that I have with Karl, we talk about the new Penny strip in The Village Voice, but we also talk about many of his other works, including his Xeric Award-winning Guilty, his collections Whatever, The Lodger, and Failure, and we talk about a new book that he's going to have coming out this year from Retrofit Big Planet, as well as future plans for the yet-to-be-published Success and Other Stories. This was a fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I have the pleasure of talking with Karl Stevens. He has a strip in The Village Voice called Penny, and I want to talk to him about that comic as well as a number of his other books. Karl, welcome to the Comics Alternative.
Oh, thanks for having me, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here. Big fan of the show.
Yeah, I was going to begin by telling our listeners that this came about to some degree because you were a listener to the show and had corresponded with us a couple of years ago.
That's right. I have no shame.
Yes.
Anything for self-promotion.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And hey, this is self-promoting the Comics Alternative by telling everyone that you listen to the show.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yes. But you just last year began a strip in the Village Voice, Penny, and I was wondering if you can introduce everyone to that strip and also tell us how that came about.
Sure. Well, Penny is basically the kind of classic cat comic, though I'm sort of doing it in this really realistic style, which is sort of what I've been known for to the very small part of the population that knows my work. But it's definitely it's like a gag strip, but more of like a darker tone. It's sort of just the inner thoughts of my cat as it exists in my apartment. And she like interacts with her like human owners, but not really like directly. And she sort of just like philosophizes about her existence and recently about her sort of checkered past as like an alley cat. But I started doing it in October, so it's still like relatively new. So it's been kind of exciting and sort of fresh to like work out the ideas. But it like came about from Tom Spurgeon, the great influential critic who runs the website comicsreporter.com. I'd known Tom for about probably 10 or 15 years at this point, and he's always been really supportive of my work. And he had contacted me because The Voice had asked him to find cartoonists because they wanted to start running comics again. So I guess he came up with a list of a bunch of people that he thought might be interested in, and I was on that list. And he asked me if I was interested and told me how much they paid, and I was like, absolutely. So I just started brainstorming ideas because they weren't really looking for anything specific. It was just sort of I think he just showed them a bunch of like I said, like a bunch of different cartoonists, and then it was sort of like loosey-goosey, I guess. Just we had to come up with like something and just pitch it to them. But that's what I thought. There wasn't really any like direct contact. So I came up with this autobio strip first, and they like seemed to like that. And then I went and like met with the editor, and we like talked about it. And then the editor changed, and they weren't really into the autobio stuff. So I came up with this sci-fi strip that was, sort of wacky and out there, this sort of like feminist version of like Barbarella. And, they weren't really into that, like the sci-fi thing. And they wanted something that, had more like a wider appeal. So I was just talking to my wife, Alex, and, she said, why not do a cat comic, do something about Penny. So I just came up with a couple Penny strips, and they just went for it. So now I'm doing Penny.
So Penny is the actual cat you own. So that is your cat you're writing about.
It is, yeah. Yeah, Penny is my actual cat. So and she's not a very good model, so it's hard to get her to sit still. But yeah, so it's sort of autobio. But not really. It's like kind of fun because I did a weekly strip for the Boston Phoenix from 2005 to 2012. So I had a lot of experience just meeting the deadlines and like the sort of rhythms of it. And I kind of missed it because since that strip ended, I've been trying and failing to sort of come up with what I was going to do, next. And I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do something that had like a weekly deadline or, even just like standalone strips. I was sort of moving towards doing like longer stories. And I don't know, just nothing really was like clicking for me. Or I was just not having any luck getting anything published. So it's kind of nice that like this has happened, that, maybe I'm just like figuring out that that's the kind of cartoonist I am, is just, a classic weekly alternative cartoonist, because it definitely comes more natural to me.
Now, you said that when you first went to the Village Voice, you came to them with a couple of ideas. One was a sci-fi strip, and then the other was something a little more directly autobiographical. Was this something like what you had done previously in the Boston Phoenix?
Yeah, I mean, both those things. Well, the Phoenix strip started off as more autobio, or I guess more just like fiction, for lack of, I mean, I hate the phrase slice of life, but it was sort of like that, I guess, because I had this book published with a Zero grant that was called Guilty, and that was this fictional book about these people in their 20s that used to date, and they like meet up for a drink. It's just this short 60-page story. But after it was published, the Phoenix did a review of it, and they liked it. And it was around the time that they were redesigning the paper, and they thought that it would be great to have a comic strip that sort of took place in Boston and was about people in their 20s just living life, because there's a big student population in Boston. So I developed this strip that was sort of that had some of the same characters from Guilty, and just kind of went from there. And it was called Whatever. And so it was a bit of a challenge, because I hadn't really done like standalone strips up to that point. I mean, it was definitely more charged to do like longer form stories, like graphic novels. I imagined that I would go on from Guilty and just do longer and longer stories. But doing that strip sort of derailed me in that thinking, and I had to reconceptualize my approach. So when I look back on those early strips, I can definitely see the growth, and just trying to figure out the like rhythms of just having a self-contained strip. I mean, I would do like longer stories too that would go on week to week, but I mean, even that was obviously a challenge, because you don't expect people to like remember exactly what happened from the previous week. So I was finding myself just reading like a lot of old like adventure strips like Flash Gordon and things like that would like serialize these stories week to week. And well, now I'm getting off topic. But
No. I mean, I find that fascinating that you were looking at some of the classical serial strips in order to get, if not inspiration or ideas, then a sense of, how others did it, to sustain that on a weekly or even daily basis with many.
Yeah, exactly. And also in the styles too, because I hadn't really looked at, the great realistic comics people like that closely up until then, because, a lot of, I mean, my inspiration, I was, pretentiously from like the fine art world and like art history. I went to art school briefly. I did like 2 semesters, and I dropped out mostly for economic reasons. Like my parents weren't really helping me, and I couldn't afford to stay in school. So, but I was, like while I was there, I had a like painting teacher who I'm still friends with, who really encouraged like my interest in art history, and that sort of formed like the basis to where I sort of like saw myself as a visual artist. So I was looking more at like Rembrandt etchings or like Dürer drawings, and just sort of like the whole Western canon, and I was more turned on by that. And at the same time, I was really looking at alternative comics too. I mean, like I like grown up obviously reading comics, and I was really sort of, I mean, I knew that's what I wanted to do, anyway, so actually maybe we should just like back up and we like talk about that.
Yeah, well, you were saying something about looking at some of the classic strips. I mean, I couldn't help but think of, let's say, someone like Hal Foster, who is known for his highly detailed work. And, I've known about your work since the publication of Guilty in, when was it, 2005?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the one thing, if I describe your work to someone, it is highly detailed or maybe realistic or photorealistic in style. And it just seems to me that with a weekly strip, I mean, my God, how much time do you put into each of those strips? And I know that those who may have, let's say, a less realistic, cartoony, or iconic styles, whatever you choose to call it, definitely not as detailed. It takes them, quite a while to create their weekly installment as well. But man, I mean, you can definitely see this in that first collection that came out in 2008 of your Whatever strips, Whatever, that Alternative Comics put out. And it's like, oh my God, this is a weekly strip. I mean, that is really impressive. All that detail that goes into each one of those.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I like looking back, I probably should have like simplified it, but I know that like what was going on in my mind, that it was sort of twofold. That like I put in all that cross-hatching and lines because I knew that like it was going to be reproduced in a much smaller size. I mean, I was drawing them probably 8 inches by 10 inches, and they're being reduced down to 4 by 6. And I thought I was sort of being punk rock by saying that I was going to put in all this detail and like it wasn't even going to get reproduced, like that. And it like wasn't. It was just sort of this gross like dot matrix-y looking kind of thing when it was in the paper. But I thought, I guess I was also thinking that about like the book collection. Like I'm always thinking about wanting things to be in books and like reproduce a lot better. But I'm sure part of it was a compulsion too, just to, sort of make all those renderings. There is something really, sort of comforting about making all those lines. But yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of it did just come from that aesthetic of just wanting it to look, like an old master, etching, and that's what I was just looking at a lot. And just also that, like that type of realism in comics, I feel hasn't really been pushed, as far as it could go. Like when we talk about like the classic realist cartoonists like Alex Raymond or Hal Foster, I mean, yes, there's like a lot of detail and like realism, but there's also a lot of simplification in their work. There really hasn't really been anyone really pushing the realism as far as it could go. And I think that was, or that is like my main, aesthetic drive, is just to try to make the art and also the stories as sort of naturalistic as possible. 'Cause I just find that comics can really express the real world better than like any other medium, whether it's, movies or, like even novels. I mean, there's just a lot more you can do with this blend of words and pictures. So, but having said that, I've definitely have simplified my style more these days than, back in the Whatever days. I'm thinking more about color, how it, like interacts with the lines. So that's forced me to, like simplify a bit. So, and I have been looking at, Alex Raymond a lot more recently and just studying, his like Rip Kirby strips that he did, towards the end of his life. Just the way that he used the brush, and I've been trying to incorporate that more. Like I want to master doing that sort of fluid brush technique. So in a way, I'm sort of, like moving away from that original aesthetic of trying to make it look like etchings, and I'm getting more into the sort of romantic flair of, like the great illustrators of the early 20th century and, trying to be more like Alex Raymond. Mm-hmm. But, I'm sure it's morphing into something else.
Now, a second ago when you did describe the strip in the Village Voice Penny as kind of a gag cat strip, but one that's highly detailed. I don't want our listeners to get a sense that this is anything like Jim Davis's Garfield. A very different kind of nothing wrong with Garfield, but a very different kind of strip, a very different kind of gag, and definitely a different kind of art. I'm with you when you say that kind of heavily detailed, cross-hatched style of illustration in comics, alternative or otherwise, just doesn't seem to be pushed far enough, and I think that's one of the things that makes your work stand out. On the other hand, I can see where this would make your comics stand out, but maybe for many readers maybe not in the best of ways, because they may look at that and think, this is not a comic, because it doesn't look like about every other comic that they would encounter either in the newspapers or in their local comic shop or a graphic novel section. It's just something very different, without realizing that you in many ways are writing within a long tradition of American comics creators, and not just American, but there's a lot of other stuff like what you're doing stylistically. It's just not prominent today as it once had been.
That's true. And it's also, I definitely recognize that conservatism, like within like the larger comics readership. And that's something that I've heard before, that it's not a comic because it's not simplified. And it's that old sort of Scott McCloud thing about how it sort of like interrupts the flow of the work. But I really don't agree with that, just because it's never really been done before, and it's sort of uncharted territory. And also, why do comics have to look a certain way? Like it just seems just sort of boring that like they have to, all be these sort of simplified shapes that are all supposed to be read the same way. It's like that old, like a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? Mm-hmm. So, like if like you did have these stories that, just had these sort of complex drawings, like that adds something else to the story. It doesn't necessarily, just have to be this 6 or 9 panel grid that just tells it. There are like a million ways to make comics, and like, I feel like this way hasn't really been explored as fully as it could be. And I'm just really excited by that.
It's interesting that you mentioned Scott McCloud for a couple of reasons. One, I hadn't thought before regarding your art and your style, Scott McCloud, but it strikes me now that your work, at least for me, seems to be an example that works against that dichotomy that McCloud establishes, and that is that the more iconic an image is, especially a human image, the more that we as readers would probably identify with it, while on the other hand, the more photorealistic an illustration is, the less we're able to identify or empathize with it. In other words, there's something kind of distancing about the realistic image. But I can say that with your work, there's definitely something to appreciate, empathize, and identify with. And it's also interesting that you brought up McCloud, because just the other day for one of my classes at UT Dallas, I brought up this same dichotomy, and I was asking my students what they thought of this theory of McCloud's, the iconic versus the photorealistic. And I think they were kind of, I don't know, back and forth, iffy on it. But I think, yours would be a style that would, I think, seem to undermine that dichotomy of McCloud's.
Yeah, and that's really like what I'm out to prove is that he's wrong. And that like the reason why he says that is because he's not a great draftsman. And I like find it interesting that, like him and, like Matt Madden and Jessica Abel say the same thing. And, Frank Santoro, like they're all like not like the greatest draftsmen. So it's like, how can they really sort of prove that theory, Mm-hmm. So I just think that it just hasn't really been done. So it's impossible to like say that. So
right. Now, when we get to something like Penny, it's a little different because we're not dealing with a human face. We're dealing with the face of a cat, which, of course, everybody is wanting to just pick up and cuddle and scratch. So there's definitely something in there that we can identify with.
Yeah, well, that's true. But, it's, I mean, I just look at just like the history of this drawing and painting, it's, people have been identifying with realistic looking imagery for, hundreds, if not thousands of years, Mm-hmm. So just like the notion of like the icon is as being like the only way that people are able to identify with something just seems false to me.
Well, and another big difference between your approach and that of others that you've mentioned, like, McCloud, Madden, Abel, is that you come, at least it seems to me, from more of a heavily weighted traditional art background. And this is something that comes out in quite a number of your early strips, that went into Whatever, in that we would often see you in these strips doing work, not so much cartooning, but painting, where you would actually work with models, and some of your speculations or the speculations of other characters were rather philosophical in nature when it comes to aesthetics about, what is art? What can we do with this? Now, right. These other creators like, McCloud, Abel, et al., they may have, and I'm sure they do a strong art background, but this is something that you seem to be very engaged in. In other words, it's not just something in your background. It's something that you're actively and currently working with to where, call you an artist, to call you a cartoonist. I wouldn't know which. And even in the collections like Whatever, the Lodger, you intersperse the strips with reproductions of some of your paintings, which I really appreciate because one complements the other.
Right. And like that's the idea. So like I really want to blur those lines. Like there is definitely a crossover between the fine art world of just image making and, to a lesser extent the like history of like narrative art and illustration, with comics. It's still drawings, even if there are like word balloons. And if you look at the Sistine Chapel, isn't that, that's just one giant comic strip in a way. So, would you call Michelangelo, an illustrator? It's this whole, it's a whole notion of like narrative art, but also just visual art in general as like a storytelling device, but also just as something that exists as art, because it doesn't necessarily have to be, part of this like linear narrative. And I guess that's what I was doing more so like with the Lodger, was just having, because it was an autobiographical story and there were just these moments, that happen in, your life that aren't necessarily, like connected to anything, but like they are just this imagery that sort of sticks out and exists. And I wanted to try to convey that, like there are just these random moments that, are like beautiful or something that, could like just add something to the story, but without, getting you to act 2 or something.
Let's talk about your collection, The Lodger, for a moment, because I have to say, of all of your works, that has to be my favorite because of the various things that it does. And also, it nicely pulls together several of the threads of our conversation today. One thing that it brings in is your very strong link to the world of art with a capital A, or fine arts, because in The Lodger, very early on, you tell us that you had broken up with your girlfriend at the time. I think you guys were planning on moving in together. She decided that she had second thoughts. And so you were left without a place, and you went to stay at the house of a former art teacher, Anthony, Apessos?
Apessos.
Apessos. And you did a book with Anthony Apessos back in 2007, Anatomy for Artists, where I guess, did he write the content, but you did the illustration work?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And so, that is a book for our listeners, that they can still get.
Yeah, it's still available. I mean, you can find it on Amazon.
On Amazon. But it is a book, I mean, as the title suggests, on anatomy, of how to work on and then represent anatomy. And it is quite detailed in its focus and in its offerings. So there's that. But the other thing another thing that I find striking about The Lodger is, especially when you compare it to Whatever and then the book that came after The Lodger, your collection Failure, is that The Lodger is a more coherent storyline. Now, there are parts of it that don't necessarily figure in tightly into the main story, but it's nonetheless a part of the story. But with The Lodger, you have something closer to what you were doing with that short work, Guilty, that came out in 2005, that you won the Xeric Award for the previous year. So I don't like the term graphic novel, and if you listen to the podcast, you know that I don't like that term graphic novel. But if one were to force me to use the term graphic novel, I would say that definitely would apply to The Lodger in ways that it wouldn't to, let's say, Whatever or Failure.
Oh, how so?
Because there's more of a coherent storyline.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Now, because we do get, and I think in many ways we could read The Lodger as a growth narrative. We see you at the very beginning at a point of crisis, right? Your girlfriend decides that she doesn't really want to move in together. That leaves you. Pardon?
No, I said who could blame her? like at that point.
But anyway. And then that throws you for a tailspin. You don't have a place to stay. You stay with your art teacher, Tony, and his family. I think that's an interesting direction that the story goes in. But then we're also introduced to a number of other characters. During this time in your life, you eventually meet Anne. Is that her name?
Yeah.
And that's the end of the relationship that the book ends with. And so it just strikes me as a more linear narrative where we can see what you're going through, how you're dealing with your problems, the ups and downs. So that's why there's something more novelistic about The Lodger when compared to, let's say, the strips in Whatever and Failure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, I didn't set out to conceive it that way either. It just kind of happened, because the idea was that I was just going to start doing this autobio comic, because it was published in the Phoenix as well, and I was just going to start. Well, I had an idea that I did want to have this book that was just all autobio, and to try to see if I could make it, I mean, into some sort of narrative, but I wasn't really, I was just going to see what would happen. I guess that was the experiment. It was okay, I'll just do this for a year, and if I get a narrative out of it, great. But if not, it'll just be this sort of diaristic thing. And so it just, I mean, well, like the setup alone, because I had moved into Tony and Natasha's place, and I just thought that was kind of funny because they sort of infantilized me in a way. So, I mean, they live in this big house, and they would often have, people rent out part of the house, but they would just charge me a flat rent, but that included meals and everything. So I would have dinner with them and almost every night. And I mean, I was basically like part of the family, and it was, kind of nice. And I just thought it was interesting because, I was 29, 30, I was very much an adult, just sort of like living like I was, like a teenager. So I thought I could mine that for comedic elements. But then, I just ended up just sort of, I mean, it's definitely autobio in the classic sense that like a lot of it isn't as accurate as actually what happened, like, because once I started just writing the strips, it just became more fictionalized. So it would be sort of like a pretense of like what happened, or, a lot of it, like some of the imagery definitely like might have happened, but the like dialogue and was, like made up.
And along with that, speaking of the kind of made-up qualities of this semi-autobiographical work, The Lodger, another reason why I'm drawn to it, and I think it's pertinent to where we started off with your penny strip, is that one of the characters in The Lodger is I guess he's a beagle, or she's a beagle, Cookie?
Oh, yeah. Cookie,
yes. And what you do occasionally with Cookie in The Lodger is very similar to what you're doing now with your Village Voice strip, Penny.
That's true. Yeah. Like Cookie's inner dialogue is the ancestor to Penny, for sure. And yeah, it just, that's something that just happened kind of naturally. Like I've never really like thought about,
the kind of anthropomorphic.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm an idiot. Like that sort of type of comics before, the like funny animal strips, but it was just fun. I mean, because it's obviously really just me, like my existential crisis or whatever, and it just it was just like another way to, and I thought it would just be fun too to kind of add some surrealism, because I felt like my work up to that point was pretty dry and pretty naturalistic, and there wasn't much room for like fantasy. And I was thinking that I wanted to incorporate more of that into the work. So, and it's a lot easier to draw animals too, but so it's, Cookie definitely I think like added like something else to the story.
Yeah, and you mentioned the anthropomorphic aspect of it. One thing that is throwing, but I think in a good way, in a fun way, in The Lodger, is that because of your style, the very realistic way that you illustrate, and then along with that, for the most part, realistic or natural context of your stories. All of a sudden, when we see the inner thoughts and the rather philosophical inner thoughts of this beagle, Cookie, it's like, huh? What? You have to pause for a moment and go, did I just read correctly? This is not someone off panel like a human speaking. This is actually the dog.
Right.
But then once you get used to that, and it's not a device that you come back to again and again, or maybe every other strip. It's just occasional. And so that's what's nicely surprising in The Lodger when you see the Cookie strips, where she's actually thinking in a way that's much more highbrow and sophisticated than what most of the humans around her are doing. But she's not understood, and so that's the gag, right? I mean, they look at her and they think that, she's just feeling a little down. Well, she's going through some kind of existential crisis, thinking about life and death. But the owners or the humans aren't aware of this.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Like actually, like thinking about that now, I wonder if that comes from just working a lot of terrible day jobs. And just having this like, massive artist ego that like, oh, you're like, these people like just they don't understand me. I'm really this like deep like artist, like I shouldn't be, working as a guard in this art museum.
Now let's talk a bit about your past work of trying to make a living while at the same time you're following your art, because this is also a subject that comes up in your strips.
Oh yeah,
over and over again. And so what has been your experience with trying to make a go of it as an artist, or artist/cartoonist?
Well, it's been incredibly difficult. Yeah, I mean, because just in like the larger sense that I don't have a degree. I've been pretty limited in what kind of employment I could get. So I did work for a long time, and I still do, but I worked for a while as at the Harvard Art Museums as a guard, and it was good. I mean, because I was able to just look at art all day, and it was definitely one of those jobs. Well, there's this funny Eddie Campbell strip. His book, like How to Be an Artist. Mm-hmm. And like one of the early pages, he's talking about like how an artist should, just get like the most, not like mind numbing, but like the most, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like job that like doesn't like require that much skill, because I think he worked in like a steel mill or something, or he just had some like dumb like factory job, but it just like allowed him to sort of free his mind. And I sort of took that to heart, and also, I just really just want to be an artist. So like I don't want to have this job that sort of like distracts me from that. So I figured just being like a guard at a museum would be a good compromise. So I did that, but then like, I ended up just getting this shift when I was at Harvard where I was at the back door of the museum. So I was able to just like sit at this desk, and I was allowed to, do like whatever I wanted. So I would work on a lot of those whatever strips actually. So I was able to just draw like while I was at work, and it sort of became like the perfect day job because, I was working nights, so like there wasn't really much like for me to do. So I would, go in, and then, like the staff people would like leave for the day, and then I was basically alone for, the next 6 hours. So I could just sit and just draw. So it was kind of a perfect day job, but it's like limiting economically. So there was always a struggle. I mean, like the Phoenix paid me, but it was sort of a pittance. I wasn't really able to like live off it. So but then like before the Lodger, I actually like left the museum because I thought I was going to move out to Western Mass with that girlfriend. So, but I was given a buyout, and I was able to sort of live off that for a while, and then also the Phoenix. So, and I was getting more illustration work now and then, but it was, it's always been a struggle for me to just live off illustration or the art. Although that said, I mean, the like Village Voice pays me like really well, so it's been nice.
That's good.
The past few months, yeah. But I mean, I think it's good for any artist, really. I mean, obviously, like when they're starting out, to work some sort of dumb job, because it definitely just gives you time to, just like think about like what you're doing, and there's like a lot of soul searching that goes on. It's like I've really never thought of myself as doing anything else with my life. I mean, even when I was really I mean, since I was a child, I wanted to be a cartoonist or, some sort of artist, but definitely more of a cartoonist. I mean, I was really bitten by the bug when I was like 5 or 6, just seeing the like, Garfield or, Bloom County was a favorite when I was a kid. Just, there was something just magical about the like medium that just like grabbed me, and it just sort of ruined my life like that on. Cause, it's just, I just really just like wanted to just be a cartoonist, and then like later, like reading Mad Magazine and like the history of like the EC comics, when I was in middle school, and I like had this book that like had like the history of that, and I just became obsessed with what was going on with like the EC comics in like the 50s, all the horror and comics and all that, and like Mad, and just how there was this like usual gang of idiots, and there was just this sort of romantic quality to it all that like I just really wanted to experience, and just just to like have the opportunity to like make like that sort of art. And so I would like beg my parents to like get me the like pen and ink supplies, and I just like train myself at like a young age to just learn all those techniques too. And it was all just like based on that, because I mean this was like the early 90s, late 80s, so it was like pre-internet, so there wasn't like I just had to like glean whatever information I got about what types of pens these guys or brushes they were using, from interviews or just things that I would just come across. And actually that's what led me to like really liking Cerebus too, because like around that time Dave Sim was talking about like how to self-publish, but like he would have these essays that would go into talking about like specifics about like what type of pen to use, what type of paper. So like all that information was just invaluable to me, because I would just, run out to the art supply store and, just like buy those items and then just like teach myself how to use them basically.
Now you mentioned Sim. I mean, we should mention that you're doing work with Dave Sim, correct?
Yeah, kind of. Although I'm like getting too busy with the strip, and also trying to finish this book for like Retrofit that's coming out in the fall, called The Winner. And I've like fallen behind with like what Dave asked me to do. And yeah, like that whole thing, like I'd sent Dave, actually this is also Tom Spurgeon's fault. I'm going to blame him, because he had written something on Comics Reporter a while ago about how, you should reach out to like your heroes if like you're a creator in comics. And like, send them something like some kind of an appreciation. And I don't know, like I've been thinking about Dave, a lot. Like I've had conversations with him, with like other cartoonists. Actually, I was talking to Dylan Horrocks about him, when I saw him a couple years ago or last year. And, I mean, he like his work had like a pretty profound influence on me when I was a teenager, just the way that, he would like innovate like within the medium. I mean, it's just like astounding to me, like what he's like come up with like formally, it's really sort of unprecedented. And, there's, so I've just felt like I wanted to, sort of reach out to him and send him my work. And, like I knew that he had been writing this book on Alex Raymond. So I thought that he would, sort of appreciate where I was coming from. So I sent him, all my books and just, a letter just saying, thanks. I mean, it was like a fanboy type of letter. And then he like called me and, which was really like sort of, it was really surreal for me.
Literally called you, picked up the phone?
He like literally called me. Yeah, he like called me on the phone. Well, no, actually that's not true. Well, this guy that like does his, cause like Dave doesn't email or anything. It's all, he's very like 20th century.
really analog.
Yeah, he's really analog. So his technology guy or something like just emailed me and, said, "Oh, Dave wants to talk to you." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So I gave him my number, and then he called me, and then, he asked me if I would be interested in helping him do a few of the pages, because he had broken his hand, I guess, and there are some pages of the Death of Alex Raymond book that he's working on that he needed help finishing, and I said sure, that I would give it a shot, and so I did. I started drawing some of the strips, but he wants me to imitate the Raymond, but also more of an Al Williamson sort of technique, and I just wasn't able to do it because I'm just not. It's like a combination of cold feet, because I really want to please Dave, I guess, or just make it look like Al Williamson, but I can't because I'm Karl Stevens. So it's just making it. It's difficult to do it because I sent him a couple pages that I'd done, and then he sent me these really detailed notes back, these Dave Sim long letters that was just it just really sort of.
It's a night's reading.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, just trying to digest it all and just do it, and he's was paying me to do it too, so there's that added pressure of wanting to get it right, but also to get paid, and so I don't know, but he had since found somebody else to help him do it, but he still wants me to do a couple pages, and I don't know. I haven't done them yet for the same reason, so I might have to just apologize and back out, because it's been kind of a nightmare to do it. But it's all on me. I'm just putting too much pressure on myself, but also it's just not kind of the way that I work as well. It's been counterintuitive, but I don't want to say no, because he is someone whose work that I admire.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. But, juggling it with the other things that you have going on, there's the Penny strip in the Village Voice. And then you mentioned this upcoming work for Retrofit. That's got to be quite a lot.
It is, yeah.
Well, tell us a little more about this new book for Retrofit, because Andy and I talk about Retrofit Big Planet Comics on the podcast a lot. It has to be one of my favorite small publishers. Nothing that I've read that they've come out with have I disliked in any way. And I'm not saying that just because Box and Jared are really good about sending us review copies, and they are. They send us everything whenever it comes out. But the level and the consistency of quality and variety of stories and art style is just unparalleled. I wish that more people knew about Big Planet Retrofit than actually do. And now you've got something new coming out. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I just reached out to Box because originally I just wanted to do a floppy comic. Because it had been so long since I published anything. The Failure collection came out in 2013, and I figured I got to come out with something. So I knew that Retrofit was sort of specializing in that, but now I guess they want to do more graphic novels. So, anyways, I approached him about just. Because I've been working on these shorter stories, some of them quasi-autobiographical stuff, and some of them more sci-fi, fantasy, and just with an idea of just putting out a classic-looking, underground comic, 32-page thing. And, he was into it, but then as we were just sort of developing it and talking about it, thought that it would be better as a longer book, because I guess they're on the verge of getting a distribution deal with a book distributor, so they want to have more graphic novels to pitch them. And so it just sort of evolved into this book. that's mostly autobiographical, sort of what's been going on the past like few years. I like stopped drinking and sort of cleaned up my life. I started doing transcendental meditation mm-hmm. and, exercising. And, I've sort of, I met my now wife, Alex, and, she's been this great influence on me. And so I just wanted to sort of like write about that. But I've also just been doing these other stories too. So I'm like incorporating that. So like it'll be the like format of the book will be, it'll be 20 pages of the autobio stuff. And then, there'll be a page where I'm talking to Alex and I'll say, oh, I wrote this sci-fi story. Like, what do you think? And then, it'll be that 10-page sci-fi story. And then.
So you're going to frame it that way.
Yeah. So it's going to be framed. So it's sort of like the Lodger in that respect, but instead of the paintings, it's just going to be these weird, comics like interspliced in between. So it's really, I mean, if you were to pitch it, it would be like the story of an artist trying to figure out what he's doing with his life.
And the title again is?
The Winner.
The Winner. Okay. Yeah. So you said that this is a longer work. I mean, about how long will it be?
It'll be a little over 100 pages.
Wow.
So
that's going to be one of your longest books.
It will be.
Wow.
So it's pretty dense, and it's like the autobio is similar to the Lodger, where they're all just 1-page strips. There's like one 3-page strip that's in the beginning that sort of talks about what's, like what has happened to the Karl Stevens character. Okay. But then mostly it's this 1-page sort of gag comics in the like weekly comic sense.
Okay, so and that'll be released. Will it be later this year?
Yeah, it'll be in the fall.
Okay.
So I'm hoping before the convention season. Like I want to, I want to promote it at SPX and all that stuff.
Oh, you're going to be at SPX?
Probably. I mean, if it works out that way. I mean, I got to talk to Box about that stuff. So,
yeah, I hope to make it back, and if so, we can meet in person.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be coming out later this year, and Guilty, which was your first work, that the Xeric Award winner, came out in 2005. Then, the collaboration with your art teacher, Anthony Apesos, in 2007. That first collection from your Boston Phoenix series, Whatever, collected as Whatever in 2008. And then other Boston Phoenix collections, the Lodgers we were talking about. And then Failure. Now, tell me, because you explained this and at the beginning of your collection, Failure, in that with both the Lodger, but especially the strips that are in Failure, you were attempting to do something different with your strip in the Boston Phoenix, correct? Than you had with Whatever.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was a strip that's in between Failure, which is what like the Lodger was called. That was called Success. And Success was a collaboration with my friend Gustavo Turner, who's a writer and also a cartoonist. But so like after 3 years of doing the Whatever strips that were just about 20-somethings, like drinking too much and hanging out in the hipster part of Boston, I was getting sort of bored with that. So I was talking with my friend Gustavo about that and about how I was wanting to do something that was the exact opposite. So he suggested that we do something about these financial bros that lived in this like other part of the more gentrified part of Boston, which ironically is where I live now, but that's another story. And but so like we came up with these 4 characters that were these, alpha male types that worked for this eco financing company, and they would get loans to sort of finance all these like green projects. But they were basically just investment bankers, and they're sort of Bret Easton Ellis like life. There's something like American Psycho about it,
right?
But it was really Gustavo's vision mostly, and so I was just illustrating it, and I mean that was also like why I wanted to do it too, because I just wanted to draw, and I thought that it would just give me time to write other projects, because I wanted to write longer. Like I wanted to get back to doing books like Guilty, but it ended up not being the case, because just trying to meet the deadlines and just drawing the strip, it became even more complicated than the Whatever comics. So I ended up just doing that a lot. But then we did about 36 installments, so almost a year, and
of success.
Of success. Mm-hmm. And then I got burnt out on that, and I just wanted to. And it was like around the time when I'd moved in with Tony and Natasha, and I just felt like I wanted to just write again. Just like write about my life, or just just have it be more of a personal expression. So I asked Gustavo if we could just end it, and then so then that's when it came up with like the new strip, and I called it Failure as a reaction to success. So which I think was probably not the best title for it.
Karl, another thing about your Boston Phoenix strip, at the beginning of Failure, you introduced this collection by stating that you wrote for the paper until 2012, and then there was something that happened that caused they quit carrying your work, and it involved a joke about Bud Light and horse urine.
Yeah, I'd done a comic strip that, I mean, it was really just this sort of throwaway strip where the Karl character is talking to the Alex character, and he's talking about how paranoid he is about how I think I don't have it in front of me, but something about just people listening into conversations and how we're all sort of going down this Orwellian nightmare. And that I was comparing, like, Bud Light was sort of like what Victory Gin is in 1984. It's this sort of, opiate for the masses kind of thing. But I said it's just, it tastes like watered down horse piss or something. And it was just this toss off joke. But so like the Phoenix printed it, but then like the next week I had a meeting with my art director, and she said that they were canceling the strip, and that was one of the reasons, was because of that throwaway line, because I guess they were trying to get Budweiser as an advertiser.
Oh my God. And you had no way of knowing that. Yeah,
I didn't. And if that was true, why didn't they stop it in the editing process? And so I was mad, but I mean, like looking back, I probably shouldn't have made such a big deal about it and just went away quietly. Because I like made like a big stink, and I sort of forced the editor at the time to like have to write a letter saying that I wasn't fired because of that. The like Boston Globe, like, which is like the larger like daily paper in Boston, wrote like a little blurb saying that the Phoenix fired their cartoonist over like a censorship issue, which is like a big deal for like the Phoenix, because every year the Phoenix would have something called the Muzzle Awards, where they would call out, certain news media for censoring their reporters. So it was kind of it was this bad PR for them. But I was definitely hurt, because it was also like a period of my life where that was, sad, but it was my only source of income. So when that went away, like I had no money coming in. So I lashed out, and it was bad. I mean, I blame my giant ego and alcoholism on that, but it was also like just a sad, I mean, it was just kind of like a shitty thing to do, to like be fired over something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was really I mean, I think really they were downsizing anyways, and they, obviously needed money because like the paper went out of business like 6 months later because they just weren't able to get the advertisers anyways. And I mean, so like the real reason was probably they just couldn't afford to, keep the strip. So, although, I probably would have done it for free, but although I shouldn't say that. You should edit that out. I would not do comics for free. Refuse. But the Gustavo strips, because we also, like, in addition to doing Success, we also collaborated on other independent strips in the paper. The Phoenix was like a great patron for the duration that I was there. And so we would do like the weekly strip, but then, we'd also pitch like full page, like tabloid sized comics that were independent from the weekly stuff, that was more sort of topical. So we would do those as well. But, all in all, like we did about maybe 70 comics for them, and we're going to collect them. And that was what Imitating Life, Success, and Other Stories was going to be, was all of our collaborations. And then we've done strips for like other publications too. So we're just kind of going to put them all together. So
you still do have plans for this collection of your work with Gustavo? Yeah.
We're going to call it Success and Other Stories. But right now we're working out what we're going to, like, who we're going to approach with that. We have this really great designer. Gustavo lives in Los Angeles now. And he has this guy out there that he's working with that we're going to like put it all together in this nice package and then start pitching it around. So, hopefully that'll come out soon.
Now, I mentioned a little while ago that, or at the top of the interview, that one of the ways that you and I began to communicate was because of, well, not only you listening to the podcast, but you had at the time this book coming out through Alternative Comics, and the title then was going to be Imitating Life, Success, and Other Stories.
Right.
But that never came about. This is the same work that you're now going to be pitching to other publishers?
Yeah, but we've expanded on it more, so it's different. I've taken out some things, so it's slightly similar, but it's not the same exact book.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just like something happened with Mark and Gustavo. There was a dispute over the contract, and Mark wasn't budging on it, so it sort of left everyone.
Mark is the publisher of Alternative.
Yeah, Mark
Arsenault. Yeah.
Yeah. So nothing was like resolved on that, and Gustavo was insistent that he didn't want to publish, and I agree with him because it was kind of weird the way that Mark was dealing with it, and I haven't really been in communication with him since then, so it kind of soured my relationship, I think. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the status is right now. Yeah, it was unfortunate, like what happens, but I really can't go into it because I'm not really sure what even happened. Yeah. But it was just that Mark wasn't willing to budge on something in the contract, and Gustavo wasn't either. So
you were at an impasse.
And we're at an impasse.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate because both Whatever and Failure were alternative comic publications.
Yeah, I know, and it's funny because like Whatever was the last book that Jeff Mason put out, and then Failure was the first one that Mark put out. So.
Yeah. Well, all the more reason to look forward to The Winner, which is going to be coming out from Retrofed later this year, because it strikes me that Retrofed Big Planet, they do a lot of things that we used to see, and we still see from alternative comics. It's just that I guess Retrofed Big Planet, they've combined forces, and they seem to do it more consistently and frequently.
Yeah.
The kind of comics that they put out.
Yeah, and I mean, I like their aesthetic. as well. And I'm like trying to convince Box to like do like a hardcover. Like I've been looking at a lot of like European comics, like the old like Milo Manera stuff like that, these short form, but like that size. I mean, like I want to do something that's like slightly oversized.
Wow, you want to do album size?
Yeah, I want to do like these album size books, and actually that's something that I've been thinking about what I would want to do like moving forward. You know, in addition to Penny, just doing these sort of shorter form like guilty length graphic novels that are 60 or 70 pages, which what like a lot of those old European comics were. You know, just doing these albums that are just these short stories that are you know, like romance comics. You know, like I just want to do these stories about people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, the bande dessinée format, you know, the larger, shorter works, larger pages in hardback. I mean, it seems to be, I mean, for what the differences between, let's say, bande dessinée and American comics, that just strikes me as the perfect way for you to kind of bring together your work in fine art and your work in comics.
Yeah, I think
these
so
kind
too.
of albums.
Yeah, I think so too. But again, it's like no one else is doing that, so I have to like sort of invent it. You know, I mean, it's you know gonna be. I mean, I'm like almost like 99% sure that Box would be into it. So, you know, hopefully we'll see if like the winner is successful enough that we'll be able to do something with it.
Yeah, you know, it strikes me. You're right when you said that not many people are doing this. Not many recent creators come to mind. A couple do, though. Jamal Igle, a few years ago when he published Molly Danger, I remember because we interviewed him for the show, and he had said that he wanted to go in that direction with the Molly Danger books. He wanted to make them larger European album format, and the first one was, but I don't know if he's given up on that idea in terms of format, because I don't think his subsequent work has been, and maybe I'm just forgetting something here, but then we have Charles Burns, who did that trilogy that was just recently collected last year, and that's something like you were mentioning, and those. Yeah, and those three original ones that came out, I guess, over a 3 or 4 year span, those were kind of thinner, hardback, oversized.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like when I saw those come out, I'm like, yes, like that's what I want to do. And also like Dan Clowes Wilson, like I've been like studying that recently, just like because of like the same reason. Well, also because it like relates to what I want to do, like with the winner, you know, because they're all just these standalone pages that sort of drive the narrative, you know. I mean, they're almost like weekly comics.
Yeah. Is Clowes an influence for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I definitely, you know, was like reading him a lot, like when I was a teenager and later. And, you know, I dutifully pick up all of his books and look at him. You know, his storytelling style is, you know, pretty amazing. But, you know, like not so much, like for the art, but as a storyteller for sure. So I mean, I wouldn't say he's like a huge influence, but definitely, you know, he's there. I mean, he's like hard to avoid, you know.
Right. Well, what other contemporary cartoonists do you turn to, if not for inspiration for your own either style or storytelling, but just people you enjoy?
Lots of people. Well, I really like Lauren Weinstein's work, who is also doing an incredible comic at the Village Voice called Normal Person.
Right.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
So she's really doing some amazing work right now, like with that strip. I mean, I feel, I know this is inside my head and it's, you know, probably part of my mental illness, but like, you know, I feel like I am sort of like competing in the sense that like I want to do something as great as what she's doing. So I like feel that pressure, even though like it's completely, it's not going to be one or the other,
Yeah, Lauren Weinstein is one of those creators that just seems to fly under most readers' radar.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, and which is also probably like I like relate to her work. I feel like like no one knows who I am, so it's but yeah, it's really unfortunate because I mean I think we've like hung out like a handful of times over the years, and she's definitely coming from like the same sort of background. She was trained as a fine artist, as an oil painter, and I can remember an afternoon we spent at the Frick, like 10 years ago in New York, just like copying paintings. And, but her like sense of humor and her like style, like, I definitely admire that. And, she's someone whose work I've always sought out. So, like her, like Gabriel Bell, and, I've known, she's, we're like the same age, and, when she was published back at Alternative, I've been following her work since then, and, I get something out of her like diaristic strips, and her most recent work's pretty amazing. Yeah, I don't know. Who else do I look at? I like Joe Ullman a lot.
Oh God, yeah. Have you read his new book?
Not yet. I got to get it.
Seabrook.
Get down to the store. Yeah. I mean, I like heard the interview you did with him, and it really made me want to read it. But I love all of his work. Like Peter Bagg, he was always like a big influence. Those like hate comics definitely transformed what I wanted to. Like my approach to like just wanting to do more like story based like fiction. But even his like recent work, like Woman Rebel, the story about Margaret Sanger, really was pretty amazing, and excited that he's doing more biographical stuff.
Yeah. And by the way, let me give you and I guess our listeners a heads up. In another couple months or so, when Peter's next book on Zora Neale Hurston, Fire, comes out, I'm going to interview him for the podcast again. So look forward to that.
Oh, great. Excellent. Yeah. He's great. I mean, I've like met him like a couple times, and I always go into like fanboy, like retard mode. Wait, say that word. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. Because you're a fanboy, and we know that fanboys always say the wrong thing.
That's true.
Yeah. Now that you mention Peter Bagg and the hate stories, it didn't occur to me until just now that Buddy and the people in his life are not that dissimilar to the world that you create in Whatever, in those strips where in the Alston section of Boston.
That's right.
Because I mean, very similar things going on. Did you have hate in mind when you were doing those strips?
Oh my God, absolutely. Are you kidding? I studied those like the Torah. I mean, I was reading those like constantly, like, and I mean, I still do. I mean, it's amazing like how you can go back to them and just they're just so fresh and like amazing. And like I always find myself laughing. I mean, like his like gift for like dialogue is like unprecedented. I mean, he can really like just like set up a joke.
Okay, in your own life and in the Whatever strips, who was the stinky character?
Oh Jesus, I don't know. I don't think I did. I mean, all the characters were pretty obnoxious, but I don't think I had anyone that was that obnoxious.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, like probably me. And I'm sure, like, when I go back and like listen to this, I'm going to think that I'm the sneaky character, and like how he compared himself to Iggy Pop, and like I'm comparing myself to Rembrandt. I mean, so it's like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. Okay. So now this one is perhaps not a stinky character, but I cannot let this interview end without asking you about another character from your Whatever series, and that is Olaf.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What's with this guy?
Well, he was just this interesting character that was just around. He like worked at the museum, and he was from Croatia, and yeah, I mean, it was definitely like fictionalized, but he was this sort of like really butch kind of aggressive guy that we worked with, and I just thought he was like funny. So, but the guy that like modeled for Olaf isn't Olaf, and actually Olaf isn't his real name. But
the names were changed to protect the innocent.
Yeah, names, and also like I guess like a different model. I guess my friend Mao as the model, and he's the exact opposite of Olaf. He's this really droll and articulate nerd. So he's not this violent Eastern European. So, but it was just fun to write. I mean, I guess again it was probably more just wanting to bring something more surreal to it. So I sort of amped up his antics. And he was never a roommate or anything, but I just thought he would just sort of be like this fun character to kind of introduce into the world.
Yeah, he is. If we were going to put this in sitcom terms, I mean, he would be the wacky neighbor.
Right. Yeah. The wacky neighbor, like the weird foreign guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, like he was definitely like that trope, So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that now, especially in like these times. I don't think anyone should be making fun of immigrants.
But those moments, I never thought though that the times that he does surface in your strips and whatever, and then in Failure, that you were belittling him in any way. I mean, to some degree he comes across as comic relief, but not in a way that I think is denigrating.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those figures. He's one of those figures that strike me that, I mean, yeah, we can laugh at him, but he's always going to come out okay.
Yeah, he was pretty resilient.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was fun to like write the dialogue, for sure. So.
Yeah, he's a strange one.
Yeah. But. Yeah, I mean, I guess like other influences though too is like Noah Van Sciver. I've been looking at him a lot. So, and I like what he's been doing with Autobio, because I feel like he's been doing like similar things with the like surrealism and stuff, and introducing a lot of those elements as well into his work.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I absolutely love his Blammo series. It's too infrequent, unfortunately. But whenever an issue comes out, and especially this latest issue that came out back in the fall, I think that was one of, I think, the best issue of Blammo that I've read. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's it was definitely like those issues were like part of what I wanted to. But like part of the inspiration of just doing like a floppy as well, just to like have some sort of package where I could do whatever I wanted, and just he seems to be having a lot of fun doing that with those. Yeah. Well, I am recognizing somewhat of a pattern here in some of the people that you are drawn to in terms of comic creators, people like Lauren Weinstein, like Gabriel Bell, Peter Bagg, Noah Van Sciver. I mean, they're doing work in many ways, especially Van Sciver, Weinstein, and Bell. Work that is somewhat similar to what you're doing in that it's not too fantastical. It does have that kind of realistic or natural feel to it. I hesitate to say slice of life.
Right.
But and the stories appear as narrative beats, right? Mm-hmm. So it's these brief in and out bits that work well together as a longer work taken together. But each individual piece or strip could, for all practical purposes, stand on its own.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's definitely like where I'm at. And, I wonder if it's because I've just been reading their strips, or we're all possessed by the same demon or something. So,
or if not demon, the same muse.
Yeah, the same muse, probably. And, I mean, it's enriched us all. So I'm sure that's the driving force as well.
So our listeners can definitely check out your ongoing strip for the Village Voice, Penny, and it comes out what frequency?
Sort of weekly, bi-weekly. I mean, it depends. I mean, when it's in the newspaper, it's generally like on the back page. But sometimes it gets bumped. But I've been doing it every week, so it should be fairly, if not weekly, like bi-weekly. But there's been like a few weeks where it hasn't been posted. So.
Right. And if listeners live in an area where it's not that easy to get a newspaper copy of Village Voice, they can definitely check it out online.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And then your book, The Winner, is going to be coming out from Retrofit Big Planet in the fall, so something else to look forward to. And I think all of your other books, if I'm not mistaken, they're still in print?
Yeah, they are. And you can get them, on Amazon, but also at the Alternative Comics website. So Mark still sells them.
Okay. And everyone could follow you. Is the best way through your Tumblr account?
Yeah, or Instagram too, which is at Karl Stevens Art. So I post probably every day on Instagram, just something that I'm like working on that day, whether it's a painting or like a little preview of the penny strip. So, but I mean, I also post it to Tumblr, so like either or.
Okay,
it's probably the best way to see like recent work.
Okay. Well, Karl, I want to thank you for taking the time and talking with me on the Comics Alternative. I know you and I had been planning on doing this for quite a while. I'm glad that we did this. It's been really fun talking with you.
Me too. I hope I didn't sound like too much of an asshole.
Well, I hope I didn't sound too much like an asshole.
No, you sounded fine.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Derek.
So there you have it, my conversation with Karl Stevens. I had a really good time talking with him about his various works, the most recent of which is Penny, which is an ongoing strip that you can find in the Village Voice. So if you are someplace where you can easily buy a copy of the Village Voice, be sure to check out Karl's work in that. But if you're not, then you can find it online. Just go to the Village Voice online site and look up Penny, and you'll find it. It's a really interesting work. And if you want to find a lot of great comics like the kind that Karl produces, then check out the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. That's dcbservice.com. And unfortunately, they do not currently carry any of Karl's books, but fear not. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com/Amazon, and click on the banner, then you will be taken to the Amazon.com website where you can find all of Karl's works for great prices. So you can get his Guilty, Whatever, The Lodger, and Failure at a great price, but you can also find the work that he did with Anthony Apezos, Anatomy for Artists. So whether you go to dcbservice.com or amazon.com, you're going to find great discounts, and if you click on our banners, you will help out the Comics Alternative. And after you do get your books there, get in touch with me and let me know what you thought about my conversation with Karl Stevens. If you go to the website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're two guys at comicsalternative.com, or you can email me directly. I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com. And you can contact us via social media, such as on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com. I want to thank Karl Stevens once again for taking the time and being on the show, and we have more great interviews lined up in the weeks to come, so be sure to check back for those. Until then, I'm Derek, and I'll be podcasting at you later.